how did KFC become a Japanese Christmas tradition? With less than 1% of the population in Japan identifying as Christian, it's hardly a surprise that Christmas is more of a Hallmark holiday than an actual religious celebration, with the country choosing to focus on the more commercialized aspects of the season instead of what may be considered traditional in the West. The US equivalent would be St. Patrick's Day, which has been similarly watered down and capitalized upon over the years. Like a lot of places around the world, when December rolls around, Japan breaks out the giant Christmas trees, adorable snowmen, and Santa hats. And while that's all fairly standard, they have one Christmas tradition that isn't: Kentucky Fried Chicken. Yes, that Kentucky Fried Chicken. In today's video, we're going to be taking a look at this unique Japanese tradition, from its origins as a last-ditch attempt to salvage a struggling business, to its eventual acceptance as a Christmas mainstay. Let's get into it. Kentucky Fried Chicken opened their first franchise store in 1952, and in a single decade they had expanded to 600 locations in the US alone, making it the largest fast food operation in the country. They became one of the first American fast food chains to expand internationally, and by the mid-1960s they had opened locations in Canada, Mexico, Jamaica, and the UK. These stores were massively successful, prompting other countries to hop on the KFC bandwagon. And after years of negotiations, the Mitsubishi Corporation was finally awarded the franchise rights to KFC in Japan. The first KFC test store opened in Japan in March 1970 at the Osaka World Expo, and this debut was popular enough that they decided to open a proper store in November of that year, quickly followed by 2 others. However, these locations struggled to find an audience in Japan, and after less than a year of operations, these stores had lost 100 million Japanese yen. The chain's early failures have been attributed to a few factors, the first being location. Initially, Mitsubishi wanted to exclusively open the stores in major cities, while KFC's American parent company wanted them in suburban locations to fit the brand's image. The latter wound up winning that debate. At this point in time, cars had yet to be widely adopted by the Japanese populace, and traveling out of your way for fried chicken, when so many other options were available within walking distance, wasn't something that many people were willing to do. The other problem was the look of the restaurant itself, with Takeshi Okawara, the manager of the first KFC franchise in the country, saying in an interview, quote, "I was cooking chicken and waiting, but I couldn't sell it. First of all the signs were written in English. The roof was painted with red and white stripes. No one knew what I was selling. People would come in and ask, is this a barber or is this store selling chocolates?" KFC's sales were actually so bad at this point that Okawara had to sleep on bags of flour in the back of the shop and eat leftover chicken in order to save money. But, as fate would have it, Christmas wound up saving the day. There are several conflicting stories as to how KFC Japan came up with the idea to market fried chicken on Christmas, and it's tough to say which iteration is true. One claim is that shortly after the fast food chain first opened in the early 1970s, an expat visited one of the stores on Christmas Day and complained that turkey was impossible to find in Japan, and that he'd have to settle for fried chicken instead. Supposedly, one of the store employees later passed this interaction on to their higher-ups, who saw the potential in the concept. Another version of the story credits the idea to Takeshi Okawara, who supposedly had the idea of a KFC Christmas barrel come to him in a dream after overhearing a group of foreigners talk about how much they miss turkey. When either version of these stories are mentioned, many Americans become confused because nowadays we associate turkey with Thanksgiving, while roast beef or ham are a more common Christmas meal. However, that's actually a fairly recent development. Prior to the 20th century, turkey was considered a luxury, with only the upper echelons of society being able to dine on the bird around Christmas time, and most people would instead use the more affordable goose for their holiday feast. While it became slightly more affordable during the early half of the 1900s, economic hardships like the Great Depression and the World Wars made turkey still largely inaccessible to most of the American public. The 1950s is when things changed for the big bird. The post-war technology boom ushered fridges and freezers into kitchens en masse, allowing people to shop for their Christmas turkey year-round, meaning it was no longer a dish reserved for the rich. With that in mind, it isn't at all odd for an American in 1970s Japan to be craving a taste of home and becoming frustrated that it was nowhere to be found. The final story, as told by Takeshi Okawara himself, claims that the idea was inspired by a Catholic kindergarten who had ordered from the restaurant for their Christmas party. Besides the fried chicken, they also requested that their delivery come with Santa Claus, and Okawara obliged, not only wearing the red and white suit, but singing and dancing while carrying a bucket of chicken. When another elementary school hired him to do the same thing, Okawara realized that he discovered an untapped market. At that point, Christmas had already been introduced to the Japanese public in the form of decorated trees and Santa Claus, but what they were missing was a Christmas food. Okawara quickly began selling Christmas-themed KFC party barrels, which consisted of fried chicken, mashed potatoes, and wine. Okawara would also claim that chicken was a popular Christmas meal in the West, and this Kentucky for Christmas campaign effectively saved his business. After making a few other changes to their strategy, KFC Japan began to thrive, and by 1973 they had expanded to 75 locations across the country. All of these are cute stories, and it's impossible to say which is actually true, but what we know for a fact is that the Kentucky for Christmas campaign began running nationwide in 1974, and it was a massive success, with Jonas Roca, a professor of marketing at Emlyon Business School in France, saying, quote, "It filled a void. There was no tradition of Christmas in Japan, and so KFC came in and said this is what you should do on Christmas." By the mid-80s, there were over 600 KFC locations in Japan, with each advertising fried chicken as the quintessential Christmas meal, leading generations of Japanese people to believe that it was an actual tradition, and over time, KFC became as associated with the holiday as Santa Claus. This association was further strengthened by the company's choice to dress Colonel Sanders, KFC's mascot, in Santa garb, and the resemblance was uncanny. KFC has actually become so ubiquitous with the Christmas season that Japan Airlines even made it their in-flight meal at one point. Nearly 50 years after it was first introduced, the Kentucky for Christmas campaign is going as strong as ever, with an estimated 3.6 million Japanese families treating themselves to KFC during the Christmas season. In the days around Christmas, KFC Japan makes 1/3 of their annual revenue, with pre-orders for the KFC Christmas Party Barrel going on sale as early as October. Of course, there are people who still wind up queuing for hours in the hopes of sharing a bucket of fried chicken with their friends and family. According to Yoshiaki Hirose, a Tokyo businessman, quote, "It's like a Christmas standard. It's nicer for celebrating without being overly expensive. You want to have a party with your family, save your wife from having to cook, and you can pick it up from your local shopping street on your way home from work." This idea was reiterated by Daya Kobayashi, quote, "For Japanese people, when they talk about parties, it's pretty much always about one thing only, and that's food. Food is such a big part of a celebration in Japan, so if people are holding a Christmas party, then it's pretty much guaranteed that there's going to be a bucket of KFC on the table." Many Americans are baffled when they hear about the popularity of this national custom, with chef Kevin Gillespie saying in an interview, quote, "KFC on Christmas. It's one of the strangest things I've heard. If you brought a bucket of fried chicken to Christmas dinner, honestly, I'd be mad at you." I do wonder if the bizarrely harsh reaction towards the tradition has something to do with the negative perception of fast food here in the United States. In many countries, eating at these types of places is seen as a luxury, as oftentimes it's more expensive than their native foods, and it wouldn't be insulting for someone to share that type of meal with you. Also, fast food restaurants outside of America are oftentimes better, as the quality control is more strictly enforced than it is in the States. Plus, they aren't afraid to experiment with unique flavors. However, part of me can also understand the American hesitation. After all, how would you feel about a Christmas candle that smelled like fried chicken instead of hot chocolate and gingerbread? Fried chicken isn't the only interesting part of a Japanese Christmas dinner either, with dessert often coming in the form of a Japanese-style strawberry shortcake. This tradition stems from the idea that because Christmas represents Jesus' birthday, and in the West we eat cakes for that sort of celebration, then surely there must be a Christmas cake. This tradition was first popularized long before KFC, with a version of the Christmas cake being sold as early as 1910 during the Meiji era. This was a time period when Japan was going through massive waves of westernization, and Western-style foods were a delicacy, being seen as a sign of modernity and social status. As a Western-style dessert, these Christmas cakes became increasingly popular, albeit reserved for special occasions. It was in the 1950s when the cake had its current evolution, and its association with the holiday is often attributed to its appearance, with the white whipped cream and red strawberries mimicking Santa's colors. Today, this cake is a crucial part of Japanese Christmas celebrations, with the act of sharing food with family or friends mirroring the holiday's associations with love and kindness. These Christmas food traditions are also representative of how Japanese people romanticize aspects of Western life, with Dr. Nathan Hobson, professor of Japanese history at the University of Nagoya, saying, quote, "Christmas has an association with a kind of exotic and romantic view of the West that is entirely divorced from history, religion, or any other inconvenient facts. Christmas cakes and KFC make sense both in terms of the constraints of the typical Japanese home and as empty symbols, like Christmas itself, into which everyone can pour their own hopes and dreams. While millions of people in Japan do celebrate Christmas with KFC and cake, others treat it as a romantic holiday similar to Valentine's Day, and couples mark the occasion by exchanging gifts and dining out at upscale restaurants. However, there are many others who don't do anything at all. What's a unique holiday tradition that you have? I know this is a super different video than usual, but Modern Girls has always been the place where I've shared the things that I found interesting, and as I'm currently in Japan, this was a subject that I happened to be inspired by. If you watched this off-brand video all the way through, I really appreciate it. Really. And I hope to have even more fun content out for you all in 2023. I hope you all have a lovely holiday season and a happy new year. Bye!